I heard you won the Wireless back in '52. Lying awake intent of tuning in on you. If I was young, it didn't stop you coming through. Oh, oh. They took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten by machine and new technology. And now I understand the problems you can see. Oh, oh. I met your children. Oh, oh. What did you tell them? Radio killed the radio star. Radio killed the radio star. Witches came and broke your heart. And now we meet in an abandoned studio. We hear the playback and it seems so long ago. And you remember the jingles used to go. Oh, oh. You were the first one. Oh, oh. You were the last one. Radio killed the radio star. Radio killed the radio star. In my mind and in my car, we can't rewind, we've got too far. Oh, oh, oh. Radio killed the radio star. Radio killed the radio star. In my mind and in my car, can't rewind, we've got too far. Broke your heart, put the flame on VCR. You are radio star. You are radio star. You are radio star. You could never be. Ain't it a ghost machine? Ain't it a ghost machine? I'm still haunted by the faces on the screen. This wind is gonna make a dead man out of me. You know yourself. We find ourselves. I deny that I could quit at any time. My ghost is a drug. My ghost is a drug. She's in my blood. And I can't give her up. The clock, the altar of time. Thought the temple of our mind. And I've been sprinkling blood of most my life on the altars of my ghost machine. She's my enemy. My ancient remedy. The gods of holy empty promises that I believe. She confronts me with her laughter and dream. I swear she's gonna make a dead man out of me. My ghost machine.
Our last song for you is called Digital Love by Daft Punk.
Last night I had a dream about you. In this dream, you danced right beside you. And it looked like everyone was having fun. The kind of feeling I've waited so long. Don't stop, come a little closer as we jam. The rhythm gets stronger. Nothing wrong with just a little bit of fun. We were dancing all night long. The time is right to put my arms around you. You're feeling mine, you wrap your arms around too. But suddenly, I feel the shining sun. Before I knew it, this dream was all gone. No, I don't know what to do about this dream and you. I wish this dream comes true. Oh, I don't know what to do about this dream and you. Make this dream come true. Last night I had a dream about you. In this dream I'm dancing right beside you, and it looked like everyone was having fun. A kind of feeling I've waited so long. Don't stop, come a little closer. As we jam, the rhythm gets stronger. There's nothing wrong with just a little bit of fun. We were dancing all night long. The time is right to put my arms around you. You're feeling mine, wrap your arms around you. But suddenly, I feel the shining sun. Before I knew it, this dream was all gone. Oh, I don't know what to do about this dream in you. I wish this dream comes true. Oh, I don't know what to do about this dream in you. Make this dream come true. Don't you play the game? Why don't you play the game? And oh, I don't know what to do about this dream in you. I wish this dream comes true. Oh, I don't know what to do about this dream in you. Make this dream come true.
Well, again, that was Nate Cho. I'll keep that for you. Yeah. Nate Cho, Peter Shamp, Daniel Kroll, Andrew Sparks, and the leader of the band, Kayla Hembry. Welcome again to our Roscoe Village Open Forum. My name is Kyle. I'm the pastor of a church that meets in this space. These forums are lecture-based events that help us process personal, spiritual, and cultural matters in an intellectually engaging and honest format. Thus far, we've tried to tackle staying sane in a politically insane world, astrophysics and faith, racism in America, and tonight, is technology ruining our lives? Just a couple years ago, I came to the conclusion that my smartphone, if not ruining my life, was at least not contributing to my overall well-being. It could tell me how to get from point A to point B, and it could tell me how long I have to wait for the bus. But on the whole, I felt it was taking more away from me than it was giving, and I found that I couldn't even come to a red light without checking Twitter. So for the past 2 years, I've been back with a flip phone, to the unending amusement to lots of people around me. So I'm tempted to say yes, technology is ruining our lives, but it's my pleasure to introduce to you two of our speakers who have thought much more deeply about this than I have. We have with us Chris Ridgway and Adam Graber. Graber or Graber? Graber. I was actually having trouble thinking about how to introduce them. According to their biographies, they seem to be the kind of entrepreneurial spirits who have a web of professional and intellectual commitments that are hard to parse out. So Chris currently leads strategy and communications as the executive missioner of the Greenhouse Movement with the Anglican Church of North America. Adam works for Tyndale Publishers, but besides that, both Adam and Chris have deep professional and academic commitments to thinking well about technology, and especially about to the intersection of technology and theology or spiritual faith. Just this past week, Chris moderated a discussion at Northwestern University on humanity's relationship to artificial intelligence. Adam has published an ebook on podcasting. He's also pursuing a master's degree from Durham University in England on digital theology. Chris and Adam are friends with each other, but they also view this issue differently. So whether you're a Luddite like me, or you're the kind of crazy person who waits in line at the Apple store every time the next iPhone comes out, you're sure to hear both an articulate and sympathetic defense, as well as a challenge to maybe what you already believe. So Chris and Adam will speak for us, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. And we'll have two ways for you to ask questions. If you're the person who wants human contact, we will have a microphone here in the middle that you can come up and ask questions that way. And for those of you who like to use technology as a buffer between you and other people, you can text your question to a number. We'll have that on the screen behind me. Those texts will be anonymous, and your numbers will be protected. So two ways of doing Q&A, and I'm curious to see how many questions come via each of those means. And afterwards, you're welcome to linger. There will be refreshments downstairs, so please hang around for the conversation. One more thing before I pass it along to Adam and Chris. In your seats, there are some little feedback cards. Would you mind filling those out for us? That'll help us just make these events more enjoyable and beneficial for you. And we also want to hear from you about what our future open forum topics should be about. So please take a minute to fill that out for us. And on your way out this evening, there will be someone at the back door with a bag that you can to collect those. And there is a space for your name and email, but you don't have to give that to us if you don't want to. But enough from me. Please welcome Chris Ridgway and Adam Graber. Yeah.
Good evening.
Hello, how are you? Good evening.
Thanks for having us.
It's true. My name is Chris Ridgway.
No,
This is Adam Graber.
Indeed.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for this.
You know, he started out with talking about Apple stores. I was in line for Tim Cook at the new Apple store. Was anyone else? Well, I know how this is going to go.
Who's Tim Cook? Kidding, I know. He's the head of Facebook, right?
Yeah, he's the head of Facebook. Guys, we are, Adam and I have known each other for a long time, but we both talk on technology and theology, and tonight we have heard that you are doing presentations at the Roscoe Village Open Forum on weighty issues like race in America and faith and other things, and Adam and I were just going to sort of have a ridiculous conversation about technology.
Mine's not going to be ridiculous.
But that's true.
Yeah, I'm going to be right.
We've been talking about this topic for a long time.
We have.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this
Since we met.
Well, since before we met.
Yeah. How did we meet, Adam?
So, well, we sort of met on the internet.
We did.
That's a true statement. You guys have all seen that cartoon, guy sitting at his computer. His wife says, "Hey, are you coming to bed?" He's like, "No, this is important." She's like, "What?" He's like, "Somebody's wrong on the internet." And that's pretty much was our relationship before we met in person. He was wrong, and I had to do something about it.
So Adam had a blog on technology and faith, and I had a blog on technology and faith, and he started reading it.
That's true. I started commenting, and I tried to be kind.
And so we so we've both been friends, but we each have gone on to do research in this area, talking about technology and theology. And so we do have academic thoughts, but we want to think about how technology impacts us on a daily, like I'm Google mapping to this right now level. Do you know what I'm saying? And so we do have slightly different opinions sometimes about how we hit it.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and so Adam, they gave us this question, and now I know who wrote the question and what his opinion is on the question.
Thank you. You set me up well.
And our topic is technology ruining our lives? So Adam, I'm going to start with the question, is technology ruining our lives?
Absolutely, yes. Chris, I've been to the future, and it is Amish, okay? So, Chris, is technology ruining our lives?
No way. Absolutely not. So I think we're going to have to talk about this.
Okay,
You brought 3 points
I did.
about why you think technology is ruining our lives.
And you brought 3 points.
I did.
And so we'll see
About why it isn't.
how it shakes out.
Yeah, right. I feel like we could do brideside, groomside at this point because there's a whole church here going on. So
Yeah, you can take sides if you wanted, but we won't make
in
them
your
do
mind. In your mind.
Yeah.
Take side. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but really, the first question we need to ask is, why are we asking this question at all?
This question. Yeah.
This question. Why has it become something that people care about? It seems somewhat recently. You know, I remember a couple years ago, everybody was worried about texting and driving and the dangers of that. We've been sort of worried about, are robots going to take our jobs? But it seems to kind of be burgeoning, and people are kind of frothing about it. So what do you think? Why is this question coming up now?
Well, we have 3 parts to the question, don't we? What is technology? What are our lives? And what's ruining?
Yes.
And people tend to think about technology as a question that we are talking about now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, technology is brand new, right?
What is technology, actually? Which is one of the deep questions.
Technology is anything that was created after you were born. Right?
This is Alan Kay's definition. Alan Kay is a philosopher of technology, and he says technology is anything created after you were born. So the microwave, for me, was just about right.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can date me. Like my age, not, you know.
Online dating, it's a thing.
But yeah, because we tend to think of older things that were invented quite a long time ago as not technologies.
Right.
So we have to start with that. But I think people are asking the question now because things are accelerating.
So you think because things are happening faster and the changes, the people are more aware of the change?
I think we are in states of disorientation because we take on technology in 3 stages. New technology, we start with them in a toy stage.
Okay.
We move to a tool stage, and then we go to an environment stage. So a
Toy, tool, environment.
You got it.
Okay.
So toy is like, and my example for this is a very old example. It is when we learned text messaging, when I learned text messaging, which I remember.
Okay.
I don't know if you do. But for me, the first time I pulled up a phone and said, wow, I can send a little text thing to somebody, what am I going to say?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I going to say it to? I don't care. It's fun.
Exactly.
And so you just start playing with it, which is how Best Buy has built its entire business. You go play with the technology. It's new. It's fun. And so we start with toys.
Or if you're like my 11-year-old nephew, he wants to practice his texting on his mom's phone. He's trying to convince his parents.
And that's why you get those text messages at midnight, right?
Right,
Those.
right, exactly.
The tool stage is the second stage where we realize if I text you and say, hey, could we meet at 2 p.m. at Starbucks, you might actually show up. So suddenly I have a way to use the technology to do something. And so I start with tool stage.
So it actually achieves something.
It achieves something.
It's
So
not
I
just
use it to
fun.
leverage.
Okay.
Right. And then we get it to there, but a lot of times we talk about technologies like that as a way to, we talk about the technology, use this to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the third stage is the environment stage.
Right.
When it becomes so normal to text someone to meet you at a place that you don't think about it as a tool, particularly, it's just how you do it. So we start just saying, oh, did you tell her that we're going to meet there?
Right.
Of course you texted, but you didn't refer to the tool, because the tool starts becoming invisible.
Mm-hmm.
So the toy, the tool, and the environment.
And once it gets to the environment, if you don't have it, you're left behind.
You are left behind.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of
See,
people
that's
are
why
in
it's
the
ruining our lives. This is what I'm saying.
So okay, why don't we get to your first
All right,
point? Why
okay.
don't you tell me, why do you think technology is ruining our lives?
Okay. My first point is relationships. Technology is ruining our relationships. And I think of this in sort of 4 categories. I think about, obviously, our relationships with others. But then I also think about our relationships with ourselves. And then I think about our relationship to creation, or the environment. And then I think about our relationship to God. Now, the relationship with others is somewhat obvious. But our relationship with ourselves, like, how does technology shape that? Fitbit is an obvious one for me. Like, that's how it affects my relationship with my body. But also like smartphones are like an outboard motor for your brain, right? So they're
It's
just
nicely done.
they're just a way to think and reflect and also relate to others, but you also relate to yourself. You kind of outsource things to your phone. And that's why if you were to take my phone and look at it without my permission, that would feel like an invasion of privacy. Like that's really, it's personal, right? Because it's like,
I'm looking at your outboard motor.
yeah, you're looking at my album. Thank you. But so then also creation or the environment. I read last week about a report from CNN, and they were talking about cobalt mining. And if you're like most of you are like me, you wouldn't think that you have a relationship with a place like Congo in Africa. But the reality is 60% of cobalt comes from mining in Africa. And it goes into places like lithium-ion batteries that go into smartphones like Samsung, Apple, cars like GM, Volkswagen. So if you've been in a car, if you own a cell phone, you probably have a relationship that you don't see. And that, when we don't see that relationship, when it becomes sort of environmental like we were talking about, it becomes invisible, and we start not to think about it in the same way. So that's how it sort of shapes our relationship with the environment. But then I think it also shapes our relationship to God. And I think that one's a little harder for me to get my head around, because like I think technology is physical and material, and God's sort of like ethereal and spiritual. So like, how do those things come together?
Right.
And the way I think about that is when I think about it in terms of prayer. So when I think of prayer, I think of the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. I don't pray that. It doesn't feel relevant to me because I have a refrigerator, right? So I have this fridge, and I don't need a day's worth of bread. I have like a week or more. So more than that, I probably would pray something like, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us, which is another part of the Lord's Prayer. But that's more about relationships. See, with relationships, I can't really control those, but with my refrigerator, I can kind of control my food. And so it comes down to this question of, what can I control? I don't need to pray about that. I don't need to worry about that. But the things I can't control, okay, that's the stuff I'm going to pray about, and that's the stuff I'm going to ask God for help on. And so I think as the control changes, as the technology shifts that control around, it also shapes our relationship to God.
So you are looking at, how does technology shape my relationships to other people, to myself, to creation, and to God? And you're saying that what technology does is it starts giving me a sense of control that allows me, well, actually, when you start talking about God, you're sort of saying, and so, both of us as Christians have spent a lot of time thinking about technology and culture, but then also technology, culture, and faith.
Right.
So you're saying, as we are relating to God, I'm less dependent if I have something that does it for me.
Right. Dependency is a good word, yeah.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a negative. Chris, why is technology improving our lives?
Well, wait. I want to give you my first reason, but I need to talk back at you just for a second.
All right.
Because what you're doing is you're
Rebuttal.
making the Babel argument.
Okay.
Right.
What's
So
Babel? Babel?
Babel, the
Like-
Tower of Babel. So in the
okay.
Bible, the Tower of Babel, the people that are building this great tower using this technology that they didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
And they're building it up, and it's sort of, the story says, to meet God or maybe even replace God.
Okay. Yeah.
And so this idea that, I think figuratively, the example is, I'm building technology, and therefore I'm replacing God.
Yeah, right, right.
And then God scatters the people. We become gods, right?
Yes.
In sort of this story. And I think it's a good point. I think it
Mhm.
does affect our relationships. I was just going to say that if you think that technology affects your prayer life, I have this great prayer app.
Ah, indeed.
I used it this morning. Every
Uh,
morning when I shower, I turn
mm.
on my little, I'm not kidding, I am an Anglican, so you have this sort of daily prayer thing you do if you're
Okay.
an Anglican.
Yeah.
And so I turned on the daily prayer and listened to it while I was in the shower and prayed along with it. I thought it was pretty great.
So you have technology to fix what technology broke in the first place.
Mm. How about I make my first point?
Yeah. Go. I'd really like to hear it.
Yeah, so my first point about why technology is not ruining our lives, Adam, is because of relationships. And I'm glad that you and I both filled in this Google Doc, by the way. That's how we did it, so
We did.
bing. And I see that my relationship point came after your relationship point. You might have gotten theirs first, but mine still stands. So here's my thing. I think technology empowers stronger and different relational connections.
Okay.
So 2 days ago, my 2 nieces and my nephew live in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and my sister, and I live here, and I love to see them. I get out there 3 or 4 times a year, but, you sort of want to catch up with kids' lives. They grow up really fast. And so, I don't know, last week was my birthday.
Okay.
My sister's calling me and talking to me, and my nephew's running up on FaceTime, and I have my Mac right here, and he's in Washington, D.C., but he runs in, his feet are just 4-year-old dirty, just full of dirt, and he's got dirt on his face, and he runs up and says, "Hi, Uncle Chris," and then he kisses the screen to say hello. And then he starts blowing kisses at me like this, and I'm catching them,
Uh-huh.
right, and I was like, "Got your kiss." And he's like, "Let's kiss again." He's like, "But we can't kiss through the screen," but he does it anyway.
Uh-huh.
But this is a way to be so close
Mm-hmm.
when I can't be so close.
Mm-hmm.
In technology, especially communications technologies, doesn't it reconfigure our sense of time and distance?
It does. I agree.
And this is, of course, what the communications scholar Marshall McLuhan noticed when he was looking at the way that different technologies over time reconfigured things. And if you think about communications technologies specifically, if we zoom in on those for a minute, we think of some unique things about them. For one thing, you've got to think that communications technologies, smartphones aren't really new. You have these different phases. Writing was a communications technology, cryography,
Right.
and then print. And
Right.
then the telegraph, which, by the way, was the first time that messages moved faster than a human.
Mm-hmm.
The Pony Express.
Yeah.
There's a French light telegraph somewhere back
Yes,
in the
yes.
400s, but I knew you were thinking that.
I was thinking drums actually.
Yeah,
but
the drums. Yeah. There's a couple exceptions, but let's go with the
we won't.
telegraph.
We won't go that nerdy.
We did.
But we did.
And it threw me off too.
Sorry.
On the light telegraph. Yeah, so if we have sort of these different these sort of communication epics, we find that they're all around human communication.
Mm-hmm.
And that certainly changes human communication,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if it replaces human communication. People sometimes talk about the internet and communication as if everyone was, and especially early on, like someone is sitting in a dark basement and there are empty pizza boxes sitting around and they've been on the internet for ages, and that's all they're doing is on chat rooms. And we talk about that as if it replaces our relationships, but it doesn't. Most of the folks we talk to online and social media or other spaces are extending or augmenting our relationships that we have in person.
Mm-hmm.
They're not replacing, but they're changing some of the modes we
Mhm.
speak with them. And so they reconfigure time and distance around relationships we already have,
Right.
right?
And do you think that reconfiguring is part of the disorientation that we talked about just kind of at the beginning? Just the sense of disorientation as it's happening so fast and all these things are changing and the reconfiguring.
I do, but I think it's up for debate on whether it changes us for the good or for the bad. For instance, I
That's
can
why
be
we're
present, precisely. I can be physically present with someone. I noticed, and you've probably noticed, that if I'm standing in a Starbucks line, and I'm standing next to a physical person in front of me and a physical person behind me, but I'm texting my spouse,
Mm-hmm.
where am I, presence-wise?
Mm-hmm.
I'm closer to my spouse than the 2 strangers in the Starbucks
Mhm.
line, even though I'm physically IRL
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with the folks in the Starbucks line. But isn't that maybe
Yeah.
how it should be?
Yeah. Maybe. Should. That's a strong word.
It is.
But I do agree that we often we talk about presence, and I think when often I think what we mean is attention. What are we giving attention to? I can be in your presence and not paying attention to you.
Exactly.
I can also not be in your presence and be paying attention to you. So what we pay attention to is important, and sometimes what we need to pay attention to is in our presence, and sometimes it's not. And so figuring that out is an important thing. So, yeah.
I'm with you. You want to go for your second one?
We actually kind of agreed right there.
Oh, dang.
Ugh. Okay. Yeah, okay. So my second reason, choices. I think technology is great because it gives us a lot of options, gives us a lot of choices, but it also sort of requires us to choose. It requires us to choose. So let me give you a couple examples. So what did we do before Google Maps? Like, do you really remember? Does anybody remember how?
No one remembers that.
Yeah, nobody remembers, right?
No.
And if we do, we don't really want to. Like, that was a hard thing to do. But Google Maps created this new option, and suddenly it sort of kind of became the only option. So just like the text messaging that you were talking about earlier, there's this sense of, well, if you don't have Google Maps, I don't know how to give you directions to my house. Like,
I had a guy ask the other day, and he kept on asking for turn by turn.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're kidding. There's a computer for that.
yeah, right. And it's like, I don't even know the names of the streets to turn on. So, but that's an attention thing. That's a presence thing to some degree. Like, I am sort of abstracted from my streets.
But you're noticing that it takes us down to not many choices, but just sort of one choice. That's how you do it.
In this case, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In other cases, it might give us a range of choices, but we sort of those choices sort of get honed in on what the device allows. So the way I think about it is because blank exists, I'm required to blank. So let me explain that.
Blank exists?
Because blank exists,
I'm required to.
You have to fill in the blank. It's a Mad Lib, okay?
I see, okay.
Oh, heavens. Okay, so let me give you an example. Because Facebook exists, I am required to choose how public my personal life is going to be. Because air conditioning exists, I am required to decide whether there's going to be a porch on my house. So this is crazy. This is really nerdy, but I'm going to go here. When air conditioning was invented,
I don't think I know.
the cost of the house had to absorb the cost of the air conditioning because air conditioning was expensive. So they skimped on other parts of the house, like they lowered the ceiling, they made the windows smaller, they got rid of the porch, so you would have air conditioning. Now, porches are an important part of a community, right? You see people walk by, you stay cool, blah, blah, blah. Well, now that there's air conditioning, you go inside, da-da-da-da, it's the breakdown of human society, basically. So because smartphones exist, I'm required to determine how available I'm going to be. So, and as we think about through those things, we don't realize, okay, I'm going to go get a smartphone or a flip phone. And but that's like a conscious decision. He made a conscious decision and said, I'm not going to be always available necessarily, or I'm not going to be always on the internet or whatever.
Or I won't know where I am.
Yeah. That's yeah. Does your wife have a smartphone? She does. So
This is how it always
yeah,
works. Yeah.
because my wife has a smartphone, therefore.
Can we talk about the Luddites, though? 1809 to 1811, right? Like they're smashing looms.
Yeah, you're right.
Wait, that's for a later point. Okay, hold on.
So, all that to say, we're forced to make these choices. Technology increases our options, but we're also forced to make the choices that those options provide. And there's a paradox in that, like the more choices you have, the lower your satisfaction is. Paradox of choice. And there's also, I have 30 emails in my inbox, and I have to make micro decisions about so it's like decision fatigue. It's just kind of overwhelming, right? So that's my second point.
I
do you
think
have-
it's good. Well, no, I think it's good. I think it's a good point because we're noticing where does technology both promise expanded choice
right.
and then maybe deliver something different. My thought is, I think you have various examples, but some of them expand and some of them contract.
Yeah, definitely.
And my other thought is that everyone has been complaining about new technologies. There's lots of people that, all of history has complained about new technologies.
Right.
I mean, one of the most famous ones was the teacher who complained about the new technology that was affecting his students' learning. You know this one?
Maybe.
I mean, the new technology was handwriting, and the teacher was Socrates.
Okay.
Because Socrates in the Phaedrus complains that writing, the new technology of chirography, literally handwriting, was creating forgetfulness in the learner's souls.
Right. If you wrote it down, you didn't need to remember it.
Seriously. And so he said they won't know it
It's just like
because
a
they're
smartphone.
writing it down.
It's just like a smartphone.
By the way, the reason we know that story is because he wrote it down.
Well, Plato did.
Plato wrote it down. I know, you were going to
come
call
on.
me on that. Thank
Yeah.
you. If Plato recorded it accurately, this is what Socrates said. But we have always complained, it was external marks he was worried about. We've always complained about these new things coming, and they sort of create a choice around us. But I think a lot of our disorientation
Mm-hmm.
when new technologies come is less so the technology and more so our adjustment to the technology, and maybe you could package it. But I'm saying that when we go through these disorienting stages, we struggle with how the choices affects us. So the things you talk about, decision fatigue or the paradox of choice, are part of the disorientation. But then we age out of it. That either a phase comes where it becomes environmental or a generational phase.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my
All right.
pushback on that.
All right.
Here's my positive thing. You ready for my positive
I
point?
am.
Okay. Technology is not ruining our lives because it saves and improves lives.
Okay.
For instance.
How so?
So last week, I was at a party talking with a researcher from Northwestern University.
Okay.
And I just met her, and she was telling me that she is a PhD student, and she is working with children who have, because of varying conditions, have difficulty moving their arms. And so they can't either reach as far as they should, or they don't have the right sort of grasping something like this.
Okay.
And what she does in her lab at Northwestern is use visual imaging technology to take data movements of children. So she has something on their brain, and then she's using cameras to look at their arms, and she sits with them during the day. She's a combination of sort of psychologist and technology all at once. And she sits with them, and they play games with sort of blocks. And she is measuring with data where the issues are with their brain and with their movement.
Okay.
And she's using that to solve that. She's looking at data in a way that we never could medically, and sort of saying, how could I find out what's the link here and the link here?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's amazing.
It is.
There are examples across history of sanitation saving lives, right? You know, the World Health Organization says diarrhea continues to be the second cause of death among children across the entire other side of the world, East Asia. Sanitation, which is why UNICEF has one of its top goals as water, sanitation, and hygiene. Still, when we have that right, the technology of that, it saves lives. Medical things, the washing machine and farm equipment remove chattel slavery. That's very controversial. But there's arguments around Keynesian theory and things on what did what with that. But eventually, technology does actually reduce the need for human slaves. We think that's a good, I hope. And then the medical things, pacemakers and examples, or even now there's technologies about restoring hearing or eyesight. I think these are good.
Yeah. Hearing or eyesight, huh?
Yeah.
So that makes me think of a Bible story, because I work on the Bible at my job.
You do. You work for a Bible publisher.
I do.
Yeah.
But it makes me think of that story where a man is blind, and he meets Jesus, and the disciples are following Jesus around. But they're like, who sinned that this man was born blind, his parents or himself? And Jesus says, neither. This man was born blind so that the glory of God might be revealed, so that the power of God might be revealed. So she's, your example, she's helping these kids, which is great. I'm not saying it's not great. Don't hear me say that. But I think it's interesting, right? So we're taking control of something that formerly was displaying God's power, and now it's coming within human control, and rather than depending on God, we depend on researchers like this woman that is doing amazing things. So, like, how do we navigate that?
Well, you're pushing on a very tricky area, right? Because you're saying, is it a good or is it not a good to restore sort of a human, what we would say is a human functioning? And like you and I were talking the other day about cochlear implants for deaf children, which are technologies that have really, in a lot of ways, been able to change deafness and restore that, except a very controversial case a few years ago was a deaf couple that didn't want to have that put in for their child because they were deaf.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted their child to be deaf along with them, right? And that as part of deaf culture, they said, this feels like we want this child to be with us in that.
Yeah.
And so does a Christian, and from our point of view, if we're looking at it from a faith point of view, do we say that's good or bad?
Yeah. But I wonder if that's the question.
Okay.
Like, I think we would all agree that that's good. But I think it also challenges, I think maybe the question is more, is it reconfiguring our relationship to God? Is that good? It's somewhere in there, because I don't think the question you're asking is the right one, but I'm trying to figure out what the right question is a little bit.
I just know it's tricky. Another question, question of restoration. We could get into transhumanism if we wanted to, and that's a thing, right? I'm going to make my leg into the
bionic
thing.
woman.
Am I allowed to restore human functioning if my leg is not working and I restore it? If I run a mile, and I run a mile normally in 8 minutes, and then my leg is destroyed, can the doctor use technology to restore my leg to an 8-minute mile? Is it? Can we enhance?
Yeah.
Can we go to maybe like a 6-minute mile?
Yeah.
Maybe. Could we go to? But can we go within a human range? How about the fastest human?
Yeah.
Can I go to a 4-minute mile?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's good with technology and humans? That's a whole other
levels.
Okay.
We're totally off topic.
We're really
totally
off topic.
riffing right now.
But we like that one. That
but
topic.
it is.
Other places.
It's a challenging question.
Why don't you tell me your third reason why you think, gosh?
Okay, so my third reason.
Third and final reason, make it good.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons we're asking this question in this moment is because we are aware of like how angry the rhetoric is on social media, in the press, politically.
You're gonna go here. Ooh.
Yeah, I'm going to go here.
Okay.
And I'm not looking to be political. Let's be clear. But I wonder why. Why is there anger so sort of clear and present, and why is it so expressed and explicit, like between people? I mean, you said earlier that on social media most people are interacting with people they already know. So like, why are we being so mean to these people, to these people we know? So I have a theory.
Let's hear the theory, Adam.
Yeah, my theory is mitigated presence. And by that I mean sort of representational presence. So our presence gets distributed into different forms: images, text, audio, video, but it's not us. It's a representation of us. Our presence is in some way mitigated. It's not complete. And I kind of liken this to, this was like popular 25 years ago. Everybody was concerned about road rage. Do you guys remember this? Like people were like,
remember it, I did it on the way here.
Well,
explain it. I'm sorry, explain it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, road rage.
You can pray about that later.
We know what this is.
But road rage, like you're in your car and you're just incredibly angry at someone in another car, and maybe you do something, maybe you don't, But like you're tucked away behind steel and glass.
Oh, yeah.
And that other person is tucked away behind steel and glass.
So you're talking about my MacBook Pro.
Exactly. Tucked behind your steel and glass.
Yeah.
And the other person is just like this other.
Yeah.
They're not a person, they're just a car
Yeah.
with some blinkers, or
So
maybe
they're
they
just
didn't
headlights
use
and
their
they're
blinkers.
this, and
Right.
you're saying on social media,
So
I'm
you've-
just this image, I'm just these
Right.
words.
So you've
and
kind
some
of
are reduced.
dehumanized them.
Yeah.
And so once that happens, once their presence is mitigated, it becomes easy for them to go from being a person to being an argument. And when you argue with someone, you're arguing with their ideas, but it's also it becomes an attack on them in some way. And that's what I find so interesting here is that there's this whole question about truth and fake news and alternative facts and blah blah blah, and we're talking about these things, but what's happened is in the information age, the question is not a question of truth. It's a question of trust. Who do you trust? Do you trust this website, or do you trust that website? Do you trust this person on Facebook or that person on Facebook? And that's what I find really interesting is that in this process of mitigated presence where people become less than people, it's no longer about facts, but it's about this relational trust. So it does this flip on its head.
I think everything you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I have a similar idea. Although the only thing I'll point out on the sort of the mitigated presence is that we have been othering people for a long time.
Absolutely.
And there have been ways to other people
We've dehumanized.
well before the presence of, and dehumanize
Yeah.
others, well before the
It's
presence
true.
of social media.
It's true.
And these barriers of steel and glass. I mean, let's think about if we were talking previously here about race in America, can we at least say that? That's
Right.
a way to otherize
Yeah.
or demonize another. And so I think, and you hear me say this all the time about technologies, that technologies carry, you and I both do not think that technologies are neutral.
Right.
We hate that phrase. We think technologies modify and change things. But we also don't agree that they're automatically negative or automatically positive, right?
Correct.
So they otherize things.
Yeah.
Can you finish my thought? I forgot it.
So I cannot finish your thought. I'm sorry.
did
It's
forget
in
it.
here somewhere, isn't it?
Well, is the
Did you
otherizing?
outsource it or
I didn't.
something?
I did. I put it right on the screen.
It's okay.
Well, I lost it. I'll get it back.
Well,
But can I make my last
yeah,
positive
make your
point?
last
Because,
point.
we should wrap up our positive and negative
yeah,
points.
positives.
Dang it, that was a good thought.
We're going to
too,
end
guys.
on a positive note.
Yeah.
And his name is Chris.
So here's what I'm saying. Technology is not ruining our lives because it's how we're made to live. To invent new things, to create new things, to create, to expand, is how we are created to live by a God who created us. And I'm going to say this as a Christian who's saying, what is one of the core things that we're made to do? And so I say that the story of Scripture, of the Bible, is starting with, and we've heard this phrase before, from a garden to a city.
Yeah.
That God starts us in a garden, but then says, go be fruitful, go multiply, go cultivate, go grow and new and expand, use your brain, use your heart, and change and make things. And that this is good.
Yeah.
And so that it's normal for us. One of my mentors is a guy named, thought mentors, not alive, is a guy named Father Walter Ong. He was in St. Louis for a long time. He was a priest. And he has this quote that I've always loved. It says, the world that God created understandably troubles us today. Some are inclined to blame our present woes on technology. Yet there are paradoxes here. Technology is artificial. But for a human being, there is nothing more natural than to be artificial. I love that quote.
Why do you love it?
Because we're designed this way. Technology is not simply a separation from human beings. All humans and all cultures create technologies. And this is by God's design. Point.
So we're moving from a garden to a city. Does that mean that we I mean, we're here in Chicago. Have we arrived? Have we arrived?
Have we arrived?
I mean, we're not in a garden anymore.
Are you trying to make the point that last weekend it was already again the highest shooting level in the city if you didn't look this last weekend?
I was
Something
not
like
making that point, but it's a legitimate question.
I'm going to say we haven't arrived,
Yeah.
but I'm going to say that technology has the power to amplify. That was the point from before.
Oh, good. You came back to it.
I'm so there. Technology carries all the sin and grace of humans. It just amplifies it or extends it. But technology, that's why I was saying about technology not being neutral and where did these things come from. It carries the sin and the grace. So a gun in the situation in the city which breaks my heart, a gun extends some of the darkness and brokenness of human power. But technology also has the ability to amplify grace in the way that God gave us. That's my point.
It's a good point. I have to push back. It is a good point, though. I think I wish that technology extended grace as much as it extended sort of the evil within us. I don't know if it does. Maybe it will. Maybe it can. I don't know. As far as the Garden of Genesis, the city of Revelation 21, we're somewhere in between those two. I also recognize, again, I'm going to pull out my Bible knowledge and drop it on you and say the city, it's coming down out of heaven from God. And I don't know how that relates to the city that we create. I think it does. I think it probably does, but I don't know exactly how those two things intersect.
Yeah, what did God create and what did we create is what you want to ask.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But it again comes back to technologies changing our relationship with God, with ourselves, with creation, with others, and how do we sort of bring all those things together as we think about technology.
It's a good rubric. Well, I think I'm right, guys. I don't know about you. I feel like I just won that. But why don't we wrap up our conversation and give people a chance for Q&A?
Yeah, we would love your questions.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Where do you want to arrange here?
And maybe people voted based on whether they texted
Yeah,
or
can we
are
vote?
going to ask.
Oh, that's true.
We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, in IRL, yeah.
Thank you guys. That was a great conversation. I'll get us started. It's a question of my own. So I mentioned earlier that I gave up my smartphone because I had some addictive tendencies with social media, especially. But is the problem with the design of smartphones where they intentionally interrupt you constantly, like a toddler, like demanding your attention, constantly buzzing in your pocket? Is the problem that with the design itself, it's trying to rope you in unhelpful ways, or is the problem me and my own inability to use otherwise good technology smartly?
So the notification systems of apps on our phones are designed by publishers to bring us back, right?
To addict us, you mean?
To addict us. Thank you.
In a strong language.
Can we talk about this? Because Adam decided the other day that he was going to start turning his phone to make it less addictive. I don't know if you've seen this, but you can turn your iPhone. You can make it black and white. Whoa.
Grayscale. Go grayscale.
If you
Go
use
grayscale.
the accessibility features, and he did this so that the notifications, the red ones, don't show up quite as brightly.
Yeah.
I thought you were ridiculous.
Yeah. For like, I was like trying to convince you of this for like some weeks, and you were totally resistant to it, not open-minded at all.
I've been trying it.
But then you tried it, yeah.
I have been trying it, and it's helping.
It's surprising, right?
The publishers do create intentionally, try to pull us back to the app, right? Because they're making money. But I think there's character and integrity. There's two things. One, when we talk about technology as an object, we say technology. Oh, my phone is buzzing, or I had to do email all day. I'm like, really? Weren't you answering people? Like, wasn't the person buzzing your phone no, that's different. If Candy Crush is buzzing you all the time, come on. But I'm just saying, if it's a text message, if it's communication and technology, can we please stop talking about the technology as a technology? And can we please start talking about the person behind that technology and talk about how we're limiting or gaining access to people in that space? That's my thought there.
Yeah, but at the same time, corporations are involved. So we have a relationship via texting, but the media that's in between us, not like the press, but like the medium between us has an incentive for how our relationship looks and how we're relating to each other on Facebook, on texting, whatever. Are they malicious? I don't think so, but I do think that they have a financial incentive, and that complicates things.
Thanks, guys. So a few questions here. One's not really a question. It just says, it's hot in here. So it is. So I mentioned AC. I did turn the AC on earlier. So
thank you.
Front porch.
We're going out on the porch later.
Another question. Would you say technology like social media, Facebook, is like TV in that it steals time that we could use otherwise for social interactions, prayer, and so forth?
Wow. Well, I want to make a distinction between TV and social media first, because one is a broadcast medium and one is a digital medium. And a broadcast medium is a one-way medium. So you think of radio, you think of television. And sort of the era that is, big TV anchors on the news, the three big anchors, and one authoritative person talks out at you and there's no other way to talk back. A digital medium is any kind of medium, like a social media, where people can interact or change something. So I'm just going to use those in two definitions. In that sense, I think they are really different relationally, and they're really different human-wise. I would say broadcast media is possibly the least human version of communications technologies that we've had over time. It's one authoritative thing to out, and it usually goes along with things like political systems, So that's the distinction between broadcast and digital. But the question is, does it replace in an entertainment sense, right?
Okay. Does it replace? I don't quite understand it. Does it replace entertainment? Can you repeat the question?
The question is that would you say that social media like TV steals time that we could use for?
Does it steal time in a similar way?
Yeah.
I think I would say that social media is more humanizing than broadcast media, because it is something that you can take action within and have a relationship with somebody else, even if it's a mitigated relationship.
It's not to be crass, but is it stealing time when you're sitting around at a pub and having a drink with friends? Like, is that stealing time? Is it relational? Is that thing? And so is that, maybe if I'm supposed to be doing my job, then that's a bad news. Like just skipping my job, doing this. But there's something, is social media stealing my time? We want to say social is a little bit more humanizing than something else.
But at the same time, just take NBC and Facebook, both have an incentive to keep you watching. So there is that component that gets in the mix and kind of complicates things.
A few more questions. Still no one wants to come up in person and ask a question yet, so it's interesting. So Chris, you mentioned using your prayer app while you're showering, so you're multitasking.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
So what are your thoughts on the ability technology gives us? Oops, just jumping around here. What are your thoughts on the ability technology gives us to fit more into our lives? Like, is it like, do we need to fill every inch of our time doing something else besides just being there?
I'm going to say I had a friend that said she wanted to be here, but she also needed to be at another event, so she's just watching Facebook Live while she's at the other event. So she could be at two at once. Efficiency and technology have always gone together.
True story. I agree with that statement. I haven't agreed with anything else. That's not true. But I do agree. Technology is primarily
I
about
think one of the moral
efficiency.
questions we argue about quite a lot in terms of living day to day is the good and bad of efficiency.
Yeah.
And I think we can see it both as a good and as an evil in our lives, right? And my personality is oriented towards efficiency. I create systems and build large things, and so I want everything to be efficient. But I also enjoy a deep, long dinner with wine and a big old turkey, you know, and a bunch of conversation, and it to be completely inefficient, because I think that's deeply relational and good. That's all I got on that.
Well, so can I push back a little bit? So
Do it.
I'm listening to audiobook. I forget the author. She's a WNYC podcaster.
Cool.
It's called Bored and Brilliant. So she's arguing that being bored actually helps us to be creative.
Yeah.
In all kinds of ways, but our smartphones don't allow us to ever be bored. We're constantly distracted. So is that efficiency? Are we? Is there a point where efficiency is actually stealing our creativity? Yeah. Or other things?
I think there's definitely that risk in play. Boredom is a good word. There is value in boredom, I think, and I think we have to sort of make room for that, I guess. But it becomes a choice. Technology has given us the choice, and now we have to choose boredom or not filling in all the time in order for space to happen.
Good question. We'll go to our first human
A
being.
real
to ask
person question.
Yeah, a live human being. I just wanted to make sure the microphone works. So really enjoyed your thoughts. I want to get your thoughts on modern day technology and intimacy. And some of your points have touched on this, where you've talked, for example, how there's a lot of interactiveness in modern technology. But I remember an interview that I read of Steve Jobs once, where he was very aware of the importance of how a phone feels in somebody's hand. And that he wanted to create a relationship between the device and the human being, such that he didn't want them to be able to put it down without having second thoughts about it. He himself was aware of the dangers of this, and limited his kids' interaction with technology. And so just to kick off the discussion there.
So just to clarify, intimacy with people or intimacy with
the
objects?
device.
Intimacy with objects and also the technology. Because I think, at the beginning you asked this question, why are we asking this question now? And I think that the intimacy of technology is what's forcing this question, that modern technology is a far more intimate thing in many, many different ways. I mean, and rapidly becoming more so even now than it was, a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think that's... Yeah,
and it connects a little bit with what I was saying about the sense of it would be an invasion of privacy for you to look at my phone without my permission, because it's an intimate thing. You got something to say?
I just knew you were going to hit privacy, and I wanted to jump on it.
Do it. You got a big article coming on privacy, digital privacy, and faith in, is it the August issue, July or August issue of Christianity Today?
Christianity Today magazine.
So go get it.
The intimacy is the other word. We're around privacy. It's why we're asking a lot of questions about where's my privacy being violated. Our questions. So you're talking about the device, but I'm even talking about sort of the relationships between people. And a lot of times, so privacy is this sort of knowledge and this seeing. Right, but it's not, privacy, is it a legal word? Is it a sociological word? Is it a theological word? And it's really a relational word. We are okay with someone knowing us and seeing us. In fact, what we want most is to be known and seen, which is intimacy. But we want that by someone that knows and that we have reciprocal knowing and seeing, right? So we feel our privacy violations come in the places where we feel like the other knower doesn't know. We don't have the reciprocalness.
Yeah, which sort of leads on to why Cambridge Analytica and Facebook have been sort of Facebook has full visibility on our social lives, but we don't have full visibility on what Facebook is doing. And that feels like a violation, right? So we need someone like Congress or Parliament to to create that visibility, to surface that information so that we have it. Unfortunately, they didn't do a very good job. And the conversation is going to continue to happen, and I think that's a good thing. We as a society are going to have to continue to push and ask questions so that that visibility gets to a place where we sort of know enough that we feel comfortable with what they know about us. There's a balance a bit, right?
Yeah. And I think the word intimacy and privacy need to be words we continue to think about in the current technology environment. My suggestion for people that, really for everyone, is to actually back off of the fear impulse on privacy and think about how can I be appropriately making myself visible in key and humanizing ways to others in the privacy conversation, which would be a longer topic. But you can go read my article. So.
It's good. I've read it. I gave him a bunch of feedback. I disagreed with the whole thing. I didn't actually, but it's good. Do read it when it comes out.
There are more questions here than I think we'll have time to get to, so I apologize for that. I'll combine two questions. One's a pushback on Adam, one's a pushback on Chris about the technology on the whole being either good or bad. So Adam, you made the point of why are we saying that technology is I can't remember how you phrase it, but you lean toward that there's more capacity for evil and sin than there is for grace and goodness, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then so basically, why are you why are you saying that?
Well, why am I a pessimist?
And then for Chris, are there technologies that are so clearly evil that you say, yes, those are in fact ruining our lives?
Mm-hmm. Why am I saying that? I think it's easier to ruin a life than to save a life or to improve a life. I could do something tonight to put me in jail for a long time, and that would be really easy to do. And that's if you want to call it a decline, that's a precipitous decline. I couldn't have a precipitous rise by the same degree, to the same level, with the same speed. So to me, I'm just looking at that and saying, I have a greater capacity to ruin a life than I do to improve a life, and I think technology is very efficient at doing that.
I want to have a virtue ethics discussion with you now about the fact that I really am positive you could not walk out the door and do something to precipitously, because I think your character is too high, and I think that we all build character over time. And I mean that as a real argument, but that's a thing. If there's a technology that exists that is actually evil in its in its form, and I'll just call it evil, I think we can think of a few. I mean, the classic example is a nuclear weapon. And we could expand on that, but it's expanding the human capacity for destruction, and it's hard to say it's doing anything else.
And there's not a corresponding good bomb. There's not a corresponding technology that could enhance that many lives that fast.
Yeah.
That's why I said that, I guess.
So Chris, you were at an artificial intelligence discussion last week. So a couple questions about that. So one, if you just kind of insights from that, but also, do you view, is artificial intelligence fall into a separate category of how you think of, could it ruin or not our lives? Yeah.
Yeah, so last week we were at the Northwestern University for a Veritas Forum, which was I was just a moderator. I was not a speaker. I was moderating 3 professors, one from MIT Media Lab and 2 from Northwestern, that are all experts in artificial intelligence. And one professor for 20 years has been working on things, and he was just consulting for the UN on artificial intelligence control of nuclear weapons. So that's interesting. Mm. Another woman is a PhD both in creativity and film writing, and was looking at how AI can write. Can AI actually be creative, like a human? And the third guy was really has worked for a lot of technology companies and has worked with Facebook, for instance, to use AI to detect suicidal patterns in people, which is crazy. And so a really distinguished panel. Is AI is in a separate category? A lot of people think of AI very bluntly. They think of AI like movie AI. So there's a running robot, and he's
Will
really
Smith.
sentient. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like Battlestar Galactica is happening right now.
Mhm.
Wait, what's the cool kid one right now?
Yeah.
Something
Player
else-
One, Ready
something
Player
else
One.
on Netflix. I don't know.
Ready
But
Player One.
What is it? Black Mirror.
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
Black Mirror.
But
That's
is
the one.
AI sort of, usually people are worried about one or two things, not the least of which is Alexa is listening to you. But one of them is AI going to replace human workers? Is a common question. I feel when they feel like that's going to go down. Notice that that's been in all cases on technology. Is the technology going to replace the human workers? By the way, that was the Luddites. The Luddites were
Yeah.
yarn makers, and they were smashing looms because they were worried that their jobs were going to be gone, and they were right. No, usually that they were right. That market corrects. But is AI going to do that? And then is AI going to kill us? Is the other question. Like
Mhm.
people worry about these things. And I think-
iRobot.
yeah, right. And what these professors wind up saying is, hey, what we've done in AI right now, at least in the near term, is done narrow AI, which is essentially AI that solves very specific problems. And really the wide AI, the sentient robot that runs around and kills us, doesn't really exist, and we don't have that on the radar. So does it figure into these conversations? Yes, but that's a brief summary of some of the things we talked about. We could follow up if we wanted.
Well, another little change subject. So I think one of you mentioned the toy. I think Chris used the toy tool environment. And so one question is, would we be wiser to keep our use of technology at the tool level? Like, are we making a mistake by entering that third stage of environmental use?
Do you want to comment on my system or?
I try and use technology as a tool. I try and be aware of it. That's why I went grayscale on my phone. It's not always grayscale, by the way, but it did help me to distance myself from my phone a little bit and see it more as a tool. The environment component isn't my choice.
Yes.
Just because it's a societal decision. So it's a bunch of people making individual decisions, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree. In most cases, what I'm trying to say with toy tool environment is that environmental happens without you knowing. And so this is why some of the analysis about technology, which is very individual, like, there's been books out there that have said, put your phone in a box, every evening. And some of these patterns, I think, maybe create healthy things in us. But a lot of them also are not grappling really with what it means to live in a world where it's more like a tide.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we individually we have
inevitable.
how do we live faithfully in the tide as opposed to me as the water molecule standing right in the middle of it, sort of and trying to resist the technology. I think the environment actually happens to us. We don't make a lot of individual choice.
Yeah, that said, thinking of it as an environment is helpful. We have people that are thinking about the actual environment, the natural environment, and are concerned about how we care for that environment. Well, in the same way, I think we can be having a national, international discussion, a discussion like tonight, where we're asking this question and we're collectively making choices and creating a healthier environment or a more toxic environment. And so, the discussion that Congress had with Facebook is a good discussion because it's trying to make it a healthier environment. And it needs to continue to happen.
They just need to know what Facebook actually does, though.
True
Okay,
story.
great.
Well, so do the rest of us in a lot of ways.
A lot of 80-year-olds asking questions.
Should adults limit? Oh, Luffy, do you have? Should adults limit their screen time?
Their kids' screen time or the adults'
The adult
screen time?
Yeah.
Kids, yes, by the way. I know I'm the super positive guy. By the way, we are not actually fully on the positive and negative. We didn't say this clear. We argue it for fun, and we get to do this in other places, but we would agree with each other on quite a lot. In fact, most things.
I'm arguing because I'm right. I'm not arguing for fun.
And I still keep you as my friend.
I know,
But
it's great.
the children, I think, I really want to put childhood development in a separate box.
Yeah.
I think there are things there. I don't think we know a lot yet. So I just want to put it in a separate box in terms of screen time. Adult screen time, that's a fascinating question. Should we limit our screen time? My answer is always, and you can push, but my answer is always the answer I gave before, which is stop talking about it as a screen and talk about what we're doing with the screen. There are too many actions and too many people related to the screen. So if I'm doing work, if I'm on Slack and I'm chatting with people from work and I'm accomplishing a goal, if I am checking something off a list, if I'm talking to my spouse, these are actions. So I don't like calling something screen time. I like sort of saying, what am I doing with my screen, and talking about those actions. If I am entertaining myself by endlessly scrolling Instagram, I think that's probably less productive than me actually chatting with some coworkers in a productive way. So I don't like the reductionist screen time or technology time language.
That's good, what he said.
Shorty. Good night. Thanks to everything. I'm an educator, and we ask parents to give permission whether they want their kids to be on social media, like within the classroom, just to do like, hey, this is what your child is doing today. But we also use technology all the time to make a lot of information accessible to our students that may not be otherwise accessible to them. So do you think we have a responsibility to kind of have that same question that we ask them, like, hey, do you want your child on social media and, on the internet? Should we also start asking the question, hey, do you want your child to spend this much time on a screen? Or is that something that's just kind of like, it's my classroom, I do as I want, and you can control your child's screen time at home, but is that even a question that should happen?
Well, technology has always been linked to communication, or education has always been linked to technology. And back to Alan Kay's definition of if a technology is something invented before you're born, a book is a technology. There are 3 technologies in a book. There's paper making, there's print binding, and then there's sort of printed press, in a technology. And I had a theology professor one time tell me, he's like, oh, I don't want screens in my church. I don't want technology in my church. I'm like, yeah, and those hymnals, they're real different. Because they're a technology. They're a massive technology. So they've always been linked to education because books are linked to these kind of things. I just want to make that point because I love making that point. But on screen time specifically, I'm back and I'm talking so you have time to think about it. The screen time specifically, that's why I reserve screen time on kids, because I don't think we've done enough on child brain development and screen time. And so I think we're wise to be wary on those kind of things until we know more about that. But I'm not an expert on that. I don't have, we're thinking about the theory of technology more than educational development.
I agree. I don't, it's beyond what I know. I think it's good to go slow.
So here's an uncomfortable question, but I think an important one. How does access to pornography color your thoughts on this issue? Because we'll assume it's internet pornography.
Yeah. Man, how does it color my thoughts? Do you have thoughts? I'm not
It colors
sure.
your thoughts, though, right?
It does color your thoughts.
Was that an uncomfortable joke?
No.
Yeah, it's horrible. And pornography is the number. I mean, we want to talk about the top websites in the world. We got Facebook, we got Google. Google's usually number 1. Facebook's usually number 2. Wikipedia's usually number 4, and then porn blows it all away if you add it up, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's not one site, but if you add it all up, it's incredible the access to sort of human sexuality and desire, sort of the images have given us, and I think it's just massively damaged human sexuality and really reframed how we think about that. I don't know if it affects the way, I don't know if we spend a lot of time working on except for we think that's not a good thing. I don't know if we've spent a lot of time integrating that into our theories.
Yeah. I guess I would say I think about technology less in terms of the content that it's sending and more in terms of the habits it's creating. So, and porn definitely influences our habits. It influences our thought life and lots of other things. And anything that you practice a lot, you get better at, and getting better at porn is probably not something you want to spend your time doing. And so it's not something you want to spend your time doing. I'm not even going to say probably. Yeah, so I think about technology in terms of the habits it's creating, and the content that porn has is certainly influencing your relationship with others, your relationship with yourself, relationship with God, and creation. What are the habits it's creating around those things?
So we're about out of time, but the last question, and I apologize to those I couldn't get to your questions. Will the two of you ever consider doing a podcast together? And if so, would it ruin your friendship?
Did it?
It hasn't, but I'm still mad that we haven't posted it.
So we recorded 10 episodes of a podcast.
And we've never posted them.
Because we argued about it. It was just us doing what we just did. That's all we did.
Yeah, it was just this.
On it, we just choose a topic, and we just argue for 20 minutes.
Yeah, but mostly it's because we're so busy being efficient that we don't have time to actually make it happen.
Would you listen to a podcast if we did it? Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So we called it Device and Virtue.
The Device and Virtue podcast.
Because vice and virtue, see? Right?
Yeah, see what we did? Mm.
Sort of nerdy pun thing. So it's still out there. We might need to put season 1 out as a this we were trying it instead of season 2 at some point.
Yes,
So
yes.
thanks for asking.
Well, we'll look forward to that.
Thank
Let's
you.
keep having Chris handle one last time. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Again, you're welcome to stay for refreshments downstairs. And please, for those comment cards, please drop this off, and there'll be someone in the back with a bag for those. Our next open forum will ask the question, would the world be better without religion? The date is still TBD on that, but you can follow our Facebook page and get more information about that when it comes available. But have a great night. Yeah. Thanks, Vince. Thanks for having us. That was all fun.